not going to be here, but I'll record this session and disseminate it to you. Anybody else here from any of your Chavruta partners?
I'm here, Jenny Keller.
Hey,
Nice
Jenny.
to see you, Jenny. How are you?
I am well. Sorry, it's kind of dark, but I have a bright, I have
Yeah, you get that
in the background, so it's okay.
Yeah. As you can see, Ron has been working on my lighting. You know, he loves
It's beautiful.
light and colored lights. So it was funny. So Friday night, as the service was ending with the beautiful service, Cantor Woolman's son, Ellie, comes onto the screen and says, "Why is Rabbi Coppell all red?"
Yeah, I heard that. That was funny. You were glowing red.
out of the mouths of babes.
Well, you look gorgeous, just saying.
Well,
and
thank you.
you must be reading those things that I'm trying to read too about, you know, how to look good on videos.
I'm not
Really?
about it, but you know, Ron loves lights. If you've ever been to our house, every light bulb in my house, this is not an exaggeration, has its own individual IP address. So he can control every light bulb for the color of the bulb and the density of that color.
Oh my God.
So he's constantly playing with the colors of the lights in the house, and he has all these different presets. So when he wakes up in the morning, he pushes a button that says morning, and the lights all glow this like very soft orange, as if it's sunrise.
Oh my God.
He missed his calling as a
And
theatrical
then
lighting
in the
designer.
in the evening, as we're winding down, he's got pre-relaxed, relaxed, super relaxed, and then relaxed late night. So he, you know, every 15 or 20 minutes, he makes the lights lower and lower. Joni,
That's
I think
wonderful.
you and Ira have your own preset. You guys came to dinner one night, and he created a light scheme, and it's still logged on.
It was a light show.
Yeah, it's still logged on his phone as Joni and Ira. You know, when you guys come over again, he'll just push the button and the lights will go for Joni and Ira. And what's really funny is he's got one for my mom, because my mom's comment when she was here was, "I don't like this sexy lighting." So he's got a preset for my mom, push a button, Sandy, and it's all this blinding white light. Anyway, Sarah, tell us how Adam is doing.
He's recovered officially. Today is his first day that he's 7 days past his fever, so he's allowed out.
Baruch Hashem.
Yeah.
That will be good for him.
That
Very good for him.
that disease is the worst. It is so scary, and you know, the healthcare system, the way they're dealing with it is also so scary. His pulse ox went down to 90, and still you just keep him at home and pray. You know, it's crazy. His heart rate was over 90 for like 14 days. You know, and he's an athlete. His resting heart rate is probably around 68 or something. So, you know, it is very, very scary disease.
Where is he going for his first adventure outside?
He said he might go to the grocery store because he's tired of eating the stuff we bring him, I guess. So I don't know. And he wants to play golf, but he doesn't think he's really up for that yet. He came and we gave him Art's car with golf clubs in the trunk, and he hasn't used them, obviously. So.
Well, maybe just go to a driving range.
Does he know about the breathing exercises from that doctor at Queen's Hospital in London?
He's doing some
specifically for these. Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing some sort of breathing exercises that they gave him. The biggest problem we have now is they told him that he needs to stay. He has to stay alone though. He can venture out, but he should wear a mask because they don't know if he can get reinfected or not, and they still think that he has some viral load. So he's not supposed to come into our house for another 7 days.
Wow.
But I have 3 immunocompromised people in here with me, and it kept me up last night. You read about people who 17 days out, I think are still feeling like they should stay in isolation because they have some symptoms. He still does cough from time to time. So
They don't know yet. They really don't
No.
know yet.
So this Airbnb thing is costing us a fortune, but I just don't even know if it's really safe to bring him in here with an immunocompromised person and 2 people with asthma. I just don't know. So we have another week to contemplate that. So I don't know. But it was quite the journey, not one I hope any of you have to experience.
And thank you for being there to support my friend Zena. I appreciate that you connected with her.
Yeah, she's on the other side as well now. Her daughter is better as well, at least through the worst of it. Let's put it that way. I got some names from Marcy too, of about 4 or 5 members of the synagogue that have people that have been affected, and I'm going to send them an email. I think she didn't give me email addresses, so I'm going to get them hopefully tomorrow and send out an email and ask if any of them want to connect. I don't want to intrude. You get so much stuff. I don't want to call them. I don't know. She gave me phone numbers. So we'll see.
Nice. Let me know how I can be helpful and supportive in that.
Yeah, it's tough. I'll tell you. That was just an emotional as well as a physical roller coaster support. And she said the same thing. Person's calling you. They go through their emotional issues. Scared, upset, despair. It's hard. It's really hard.
Hi,
So, really-
Sandy. How are you?
Good morning, everybody.
We haven't
Hi.
officially started. We're still in the schmooze phase of our
Good.
gathering. Anything else anyone wants to report for the good of the order?
I love Joan's, if anybody's not on Facebook, I love Joan's Facebook post of her family singing. She's playing the ukulele. That was great.
That was fun. We're starting now rehearsals for Teach Your Children.
Good.
Nice. So I just put up the link for after this, if you have a little time and you want to join us for our conversation about Finish Strong. That'll be at 1 o'clock this afternoon. I can't recommend the book highly enough. If you haven't read the book, join us anyway. You can go to that link and review the first half of the discussion, and then join us this afternoon for the conclusion of the discussion. A really, really important book. Jennifer, you ready to go back to teaching?
No.
No. You weren't ready for break, and now you're not ready to go back.
I'm not ready to go back. No, I've been super productive over this break. I got a lot organized.
Oh, that's wonderful.
She was on her break. No.
Good.
So yeah, I got a lot of stuff in order in my house, which felt really good. And there's still more to do. So yeah, I don't need to go back to school.
I've learned something during this time is that I love working from home.
Really?
I do. It's just really nice. I could just keep doing it.
Uh-huh.
See,
Yeah.
and for me, I miss going. It's hard working from home with teaching. I'd much rather be in the classroom with the kids, and so that's what I'm not looking forward to. All of that, this type of thing where there's not the face-to-face contact with the kids, and I find it much harder this way.
My son Andy in LA is obviously working from home, and thank God their company is doing well. But he said, hey, well, the same as Joan. I really like this, and I'm very productive, and I'm doing well, and the company's doing well, and so I don't know if I ever want to go back. So we'll see what that's about.
Well, we just had from 9 to 10:30 this morning Torah study, which typically we have maybe 10 or 12 people. there were twice that many people at Torah study this morning. So I think that seeing how we could maybe continue to incorporate the Zoom technology may be part of our SOP moving forward, because there were, a number of people who it would be hard for them to drive to the temple to be there, to be in the class. But somebody commented, boy, if everybody who was on the Zoom was at the temple, we wouldn't have space for everyone to sit in the place that we normally meet. So yeah, it's been interesting. We are jumping in today on the incredibly challenging conversation about faith. And I put up in the chat box, I had mailed you last night 3 different documents that we'll be referencing. One was general thoughts on emunah, faith. One was specifically on the names of God. And I don't know if we'll get to all of these today or we have another session in 2 weeks. And one is various forms of the Shiviti. But before we conclude, before we jump into emunah, let's conclude the discussion about faith. Those of you who are following the counting of the Omer, you know we're in week 2 of counting the Omer, and it's the whole week of Gevura. It's the week of strength. So that was our last midah. That was strength. So it's a good week to still be thinking about strength a little bit. In the Omer counting, today is day 10. It's Tiferet of Gevura. Tiferet is beauty. So we think about what is the beauty of being strong. What's beautiful about being strong? And I have some notes here about various aspects of strength that come up. First of all, I think in our environment right now, the strength to accept the things that we can't change.
Mm-hmm.
That does take a certain amount of strength. There's aspects of our current situation that we would all we all wish were different. And we have to be strong to say, we can't change it. The strength to remain focused. We're also in an environment where it's so easy to become distracted. I don't know if you're sensing that, Joan, working at home. There's probably a lot more distraction in your environment than there is when you're just sitting in your office. So there's a certain amount of strength needed to remain focused. The strength to keep going when maybe we just feel exhausted by the challenges that we're facing. One thing that occurs to me is, where do we get the strength to speak up and address difficult issues? It's easy to sweep things under the rug, and it takes a certain amount of strength to find gentle and kind ways to address challenging issues. So I'm wondering, what other aspects of strength, what kinds of phrases did you find helpful? Anything come up in your world in the last 2 weeks on the theme of Gevura?
My sense of duty gives me strength. It's something I'm committed to, a duty. And because I have a duty and I have an obligation, I draw from within me. Now, where that comes from, that's another story.
So once you've made that commitment, you have a strong sense of discipline.
That's it.
Is there an example?
The question is where that comes from then.
Right.
You have a sense of duty, you have obligation, but then again, where does the source of strength come from?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm taking your role. I don't mean to.
No. It's a good question. I think that like any midah, like any quality, we each have our own spiritual curriculum. So there are those of us for whom that comes much easier. I think I'm with you in having a strong sense of duty and a self-discipline, sometimes probably to a fault. So, I can't let go and be flexible when I need to, because I just.
But then the question is, your question is right. Where you have that, but then where did you derive it from?
Right.
The ability.
So, Ginny, I don't know, is this nature or nurture?
Oh boy, I don't want to get into it. Well, you know what? I think if off the top of my head, I would say it's probably nurture. Okay, because I don't think there are genes for this kind of thing. I could be wrong, but I think that I think that it comes from a choice. What are the choices we make, and then we find whatever strength we need to move forward, and the choices. I think it comes from choice. So if we say, listen, this stuff is serious, I have to stay home, I don't like it, it makes my life harder, but you know what, I've got to do my part in as a citizen, as a person in this world, and so I'm gonna do it. It comes from choice, is my guess. I think you can have strength in a misdirected way as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's why I'm saying about choice. For someone who doesn't know, all right, here we just finished the 4 questions, the 4 children, and so for one who doesn't know, where do they get strength? I think you have to know, and then the strength comes. You choose.
So that does resonate for me, as you're talking about nature versus nurture, and coming down on nurture. I think about my dad, who I didn't think about it. He was not a disciplinarian, and he didn't have like a kind of a stark, harsh personality. In fact, just the opposite, a very amiable, low-key, pleasant kind of persona. And yet, he sure instilled in me a sense of discipline in relationships. So one of the things that when I think about my dad, I think about how he was so committed to friendships that even after he no longer particularly enjoyed being with certain individuals, he disciplined himself to keep that connection to that person. And I think also, so, he was an accountant. My mom was an accountant. Both my brothers are accountants. And, boy, being on time was, a priority value. That was, something that has just really impacted me. And I wonder if some of my sense of discipline did come from being raised in that environment where.
In that environment, right.
If we were supposed to be somewhere at 7:30, we were sitting outside the front door of that place at 7:25 and waiting until 7:30 to be exactly on time. So, that's probably where that comes from in my life. I don't know,
So
Julie.
strength comes from those values that we're socialized to have.
There is some, I believe there is some nature to it, because as Johnny was saying, or as Ginny was saying, and actually Johnny too, it is a choice that you make, the things that we do. And, my saying for strength was, be strong, don't give in. So you make a choice, at least for me, I struggle a little bit at times. So I'm making a choice not to go to, the dark place, as some people used to call it, not to go there, to instead do the things that I can do to keep myself strong. You know, don't start being pessimistic. Don't think negatively. If you're feeling bad, get outside, you know, listen to music, do the things that you can do to support yourself.
Go
And
to your daddy.
it's not a choice that I make to, you know, to have that as part of my life. I would prefer not to have that challenge, but I do have that challenge. So
I'll argue for the nature side of it.
yeah, so I think there is a, you know, I would love to be a super positive, optimistic, glass full person, but, and I don't believe it's my circumstance. I've had a good life, so why would I be, you know, why would I be go toward the half? I am the half full person sometimes, but I have a tendency sometimes to lean toward the half empty, and it's not. So I have to make a choice to not do that.
Michael, you want to argue for nature?
Nature, I think, you know, as being somebody who is, you know, when I looked at strength, it's a matter of, yeah, there's a nature. People are very impulsive. I've always, you know, been an impulsive person. And so the strength piece for me, if you look on here, it's exercising humility and endurance, restraint. Part of Mussar is restraint. You know, a lot of the literature talks about getting everything under control. I think everybody's kind of addressed this in different ways, but that's, for me, a key part of it. Not to you know, be judgmental, not to you know, ignore things, kind of just to exercise restraint, but it comes upon you. I wish I had the discipline of so many of you that, you know, you kind of, the idea of taking charge of your life and, as you said at the beginning of the discussion, controlling the controllables. What is controllable? What's not controllable? Where are those restraints? I think Mussar's, for me, kind of been a good thing in kind of outlining or eliminating those boundaries and, you know, suggesting different paths and ways you can go to deal with that. But that's the hard part of strength, is to do that.
So I guess the question would be then, what in your upbringing causes you to be more impulsive than I am?
It's me. It comes from inside. It's not a thing. Believe me, my parents didn't teach me to not be compulsive. You know, you can go back to my earliest report cards. You know, talks too much, chatters, doesn't pay attention, loses focus, can't concentrate. You know, so go figure. You know, that's me. So that's why I argue that there's a nature thing there.
I would comment that as I'm hearing this, because I see, you know, it's interesting, Michael, you say that. I see a lot of kids in my practice, or when I had a practice, anyway, you know, ADHD kids who have all of that stuff, okay? So I suppose, I guess I would agree with you that in that sense, we're born as, you know, it's who we are. As we come with certain hardwiring is what I use to describe kids. We're hardwired in a certain way. What we do with our hardwiring becomes choice.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
that
that's
becomes
what I
choice.
think.
Now, certain things are harder to say, oh yeah, I think I just won't be impulsive. I'm not saying that that's the case. Okay, but the idea that we're all individuals, we're all we're a certain set of you know, neurons and dendrites and whatever, okay, and of course our soul, but in a way it's what do we do with what we're given? How
Yeah,
do
you
we
go to war, like Secretary Rumsfeld said, you go to war with the army that you got. So
you go to war, there you go. Okay, no, I'm not
so
a big fan of his, but it was very astute, right?
Yeah. I want to add to this too. You know, I think we're all surrounded by a lot of stimulus coming at us constantly. We're hearing about the COVID-19 and how many deaths every day, and how many people have come down with it, and then the protests, and you know what's going on with our country, and how much at risk are we, how risk are people that we know. And I think there's a lot of things coming out now that can really bring you down. And, you know, there'd be fear, there's worry, there's frustration, and not anything that we're creating, but it's just, if you watch the news, you just kind of get all that. And for me, you know, I have this, try to stay even, but after a while, I start to, you know, get all the concern. And if I don't actually think about it, well, what is it that, you know, what's going on here? Is there anything that I can do or that I haven't been doing that, like Sarah says, all those coping techniques? You don't always recognize that you're in that mode. And if you do, then you can do something about it. But I think there's like a switch that has to say, oh, if I were to turn on my silver sneakers course right now, or if I go for a walk, or if I whatever, then I'm going to feel better. And invariably I do. But you have to, it's that little recognition, the consciousness that I'm in this mode. You know, I don't know if anybody has that issue, but I think that that's my challenge.
Well, I think the awareness is the primary thing that you're talking about. And that's, you know, that's we found with every single NIDA.
I think my feeling is that that's where I find the strength come in, because I sometimes am aware of, you know, where my brain is, where my hardwiring is, but it's having the strength to do something about it, you know, to turn on your silver sneakers or do whatever it is. I mean, at first for me in my lifetime journey was recognizing this issue, was recognizing that this was something that was true to me, that was different than other people, you know, that I had to figure out. And it took me years and years to figure out sort of coping mechanisms or strategies or whatever, you know, whatever it is that you use to deal with your personality traits. And now what it is now I know what they are. I know, you know, I'll have a friend say to me, you know, you really need to go get outside. You know, you really need to go do that. You know, if I'm overly negative or grumpy or I'm not getting things done, then, you know, so part of it is there is the, like Sandra said, there is the recognition piece, but then you have to have the inner strength to do something about it.
Yeah.
That's
right.
That's the other piece. And I'm sure Ginny sees that in her practice. You know, you can talk to somebody, you can bring that horse to water, but they got to drink.
Well, it's a choice.
Yeah, it's a choice.
It ultimately is a choice. And that's, and even when you don't feel like it, I wish I could, you know, I'm sounding like I always make the choice, and I'm not. Okay. But ultimately, if you think about it, I'm on the couch, I can't get up. It's like, oh my God, I really should do what just Sandra was saying. Yeah, I really should do some kind of thing. It is my choice to not do it.
Right.
And
so that was.
And what the strength is, I'm sorry, Rabbi, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go.
The strength is the piece that we need to get us moving. Okay, that's the way it's so clear to me the way I see it. But again, Rabbi, what you were going to add to that?
I was going to just say the flip side is, you know, Sarah's phrase was, be strong, don't give in. And you're talking about making that choice and motivating ourselves. There's also, I put up in the chat the Yiddish word vergin. I don't know if I quite how to translate it, but vergin is like also that, you know, you could forgive yourself, you could forgive someone else. It's like that sense of indulgence, forgiveness, of, you know, sometimes, you know, I'm wondering if the answer is, you know, don't be strong, give in. You know, if there is a place for that balance also, especially at a time like this when we're under so much stress. And I guess, you know, that's an important message for someone like me who's so prone to push all the time, that being flexible and letting go, that's more of the challenge.
Right. Right.
So Joni, it occurs to me listening to you talk about your sense of duty, I'm wondering how much you are impacted by your career of ballet, which seems to me to have been an area where I bet there was a lot of strength and discipline and duty that was part of much of your life for many formative years. Oh, you're muted. Let me unmute you. Yeah, start again.
Sense of responsibility. I mean, when we went to perform and you were 12 or 13, you had to have everything you needed because you're out of your element. You had to have safety pins and needles and thread and the makeup and everything. So you learned very young to get organized and to be disciplined and to eat first because there was no food there. You needed, that was where you got it from your father. I got it from ballet.
I was thinking that ballet.
Yeah. That doesn't mean I didn't fall through after I gave it up. A lot of that discipline and strength and self-motivation and all of that fell through because I thought, oh my goodness, I can relax.
Yeah.
So then there's finding the balance.
Now, I have a question about what Ginny was saying about it's a choice. And at some point, though, somebody who has depression and they're in bed and they won't get out of bed, they won't stop sleeping, they won't get up, is this, or is that beyond that point where they can help themselves?
Great question.
I was not referring to someone with an illness. Okay. That's an illness. When I had my knee replaced, I could no more dance than I could fly to the moon. Okay, so let's rule out illness. Okay, now for people with depression, there are all kinds of things that I prescribe for people to do to help them. You must get out of bed. You've got to do that. You've got to go to your door, open your door and look outside, whatever it is. But that's treatment of an illness. Okay, so let's take illness and the things that are really out of an illness is something that's kind of out of our control. We don't make ourselves, well, we do make ourselves ill sometimes, but let's just keep it on if you are ill, you don't have the strength to do things. And that's when somebody else needs to come in perhaps and say to you, you don't have the strength right now. Let me help you. Okay. Does that make sense?
Important question. Thank you for clarifying that. Final thoughts on strength before we move forward into faith.
It certainly was timely.
Yeah. Right.
Good. So I wanted to read a very brief paragraph as kind of an opening meditation reflection. So if you want to just listen for a moment, get comfortable where you are.
No, I'm not going to play with it. No.
Imagine a tiny flame inside of you. Like a candlelight, that light is the divine spark, the spark of God that every person has inside of us. That little spark is what connects us to every other living thing on this planet. No one knows what God looks like, but we can feel God inside of us. Sometimes that flame burns bright and we can feel God easily. Sometimes that flame burns low and it is harder to feel God. No matter what, though, that flame is inside of us. So I just wanted to share with you, let me pull up this picture. Oops. Did you all get the images that I sent of the sheep tea?
I love this one. This first one is so beautiful. just the artwork around it is what I'm referring to. It's gorgeous.
Good, I'm glad you like it. So Shiviti is a Jewish art form based on the Psalms. In the book of Psalms, we have this verse, Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid. I place God before me always. And so there becomes these meditative artworks that are called Shivitis based on that verse from the Psalms, and they take all kinds of forms, and I have a few examples here for you. But the idea is, in the Hasidic world, they talk about a concept called dveikut, which is clinging to God. And the idea is, it doesn't matter what we're doing in our world, that some part of us is still connected to God. So the Shiviti is this piece of art that we place somewhere in our environment that just, we look at it and, oh, we remember that we're in the presence of the divine. So this is kind of a more traditional Shiviti. And then here's a couple of contemporary ones. I love that one with the stop sign, though. I don't
Yeah.
it would want to live with it, but it certainly is attention getting. And then you've got the kind of Peter Maxey version there. But there are hundreds and hundreds of these. And, you know, you can do something. There's a kind of a classic Shiviti right here where it has many, many different verses.
Yeah.
And you, if you start looking for them, you can find them that mostly Hebrew, mostly English. This one here, really the focus is just on Yod He Vav He, the name of God. I place God's name in front of me. So you could do something as simple as make an index card and just write the word Shiviti, or write the word Yod He Vav He, God. Here, look. Here's a classic version. So those are just a few that I collected up. You can have fun with that, but you know, this idea of always remembering that we are in the presence of God.
Rabbi, if I just might say one thing.
Yes.
So if anybody ever wants to stop by my office at work when we do finally get back to temple, I have a beautiful one hanging in my office. That was actually Rabbi Burke's, our Rabbi Emeritus, that he gave me when he went to go to Israel. So I have it. It's a really nice big one hanging in my office.
I would love to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
So when you're not working from home anymore.
Right. If I come back to work at temple.
Don't even say that as a joke.
I wouldn't do that to you, my dear Rabbi.
Please. So how we understand God, you know, we say in our prayer, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, God of Sarah, God of Rebecca. Why do we draw out the repetition of God of, God of, God of, God of, instead of more expeditiously saying God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? And a classic answer is because we understand that every person has their own unique understanding of God. None of us can ultimately know the nature of God. Maimonides had a doctrine that he called the doctrine of negative attributes, to say that God is so completely unknowable that all we can say is what God is not. That's the only true thing we can say about God. And even he said, like if we say God is compassionate, Maimonides' idea was that God's compassion is so categorically different from our compassion that we can't even attribute compassion to God, because whatever we say about God is on such another realm, which makes the whole conversation a little bit discouraging. I think that the concept also of God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, is that recognition that at different times in our lives, we experience God in different ways. So when we're sick, we may relate to God as a healer. When we feel alone, we relate to God as love. Maybe when we're trying to do teshuvah and look within and change ourselves, we think about God as judge. When we're connecting with the community, we experience God as shepherd. So these are all in the Zen world. They say it's the finger that points to the moon, but it's not the moon. We can never ultimately touch the essence of what God is. Ultimately, we only know God through metaphor. So I was very struck by this text. I don't know if you've gotten up to it yet. It's in the unit, oops. I'll read it to you in a second, but if you want to see where the reference is. So this is something you're going to study with your Chavruta partner. But the text is, when he was once asked to suggest a Mussar book that could be studied to strengthen one's emunah, to strengthen one's faith, Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe answered that no book is needed because simply studying nature can bring the same results. So I was very struck by that. We started off in our casual conversation talking about, how particularly beautiful the world is right now. I think, Sarah, you really alluded to connecting with nature as uplifting to your spirit. Ginny, I thought it was interesting when you were talking about remedies for depression that you said just open up the door and look outside. That was fascinating to me, because I know one of those aspects of depression is unwillingness to go out, and the idea that just opening the door. And now that we're talking about it, you think about how we incorporate that ritual into the Seder at that moment when we welcome Elijah. And Elijah is such a symbol of faith and hope. Elijah, we open the door for Elijah. We're waiting for Elijah to usher in the messianic world. So just opening the door and looking out can be that source of faith and hope.
Can I ask a question on that, Rabbi?
Sure.
And this is tangential. So if it's too tangential, say, I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Elijah, I read years ago, Elijah was doubting that the Jewish people would ever survive. And God said, for that doubt, you will show up at every Seder and at every Seder, because we have that in our, was that the history of him as is that just a little story, a little Bubba Mises, or?
Well, I think, Elijah struggled a lot with the Jewish people. He was not the most flexible individual. He comes across in the Tanakh as with a lot of bitterness and anger. So I think it actually, I'm not familiar with that specific midrash to connect that up of why he has to come to every Seder, but it does kind of makes sense based on his personality that he certainly does not evidence a lot of faith in the Jewish people.
Thank you.
But I think that's the nature of prophets, particularly the prophets of rebuke, which is many of them. That is the prophetic role, is to see the negative and encourage and exhort us towards the positive. So it wouldn't be necessarily just Elijah who there's a lot of people who have observed the stubbornness of the Israelites. Hopefully we'll have a chance to move on next year to Chabura, and the midah we're studying in our Chabura group right now is stubbornness. We describe ourselves, or we're described as Am Kashay Oref, a stiff-necked people.
Right.
Stubbornness is, and like every midah, that stubbornness has its place. I mean, that could be the corollary of what Sarah was defining as a strength. Don't give up. You need a certain amount of stubbornness there to be strong and not give up. But of course, there are negative consequences of that stubbornness. And I'll just share one thing that so intrigued me in Chabura that we were studying. So we were talking about stiff-necked and the image of everything that happens in our bodies transits through the neck. And, it's breathing, eating, blood flow, nerve connections. And yet it's such a narrow place. It all comes together right there. And, I never really thought about, how much goes on, how important our neck is as a transit point in our bodies and consequently in our lives. And that when you're stiff-necked, what you can only see in one direction. You need the flexibility in your head to be able to see another point of view, to be able to look around you, to be able to even see others and not just from your own foxhole, as it were. So from your tangent, I made more of a tangent, but.
That was very good. That was wonderful.
It's just on my mind because I'm studying for my Thursday night class. I hope to meet with Rivka Felsher this week and figure out how we can get registered for Chabura. I think we'll probably need a minimum of 6 people, and we'll figure out how people are going to manage to pay for the little bit extravagant cost of that course.
Rabbi,
Yes.
taking you back to what you were talking about, nature.
Yes.
I've been so closed in, and I'm sure a lot of us have been trying to stay in as much as possible. But I went out for the mail the other morning, and it was so bright and so colorful and so luminant, and I like a wonder. And I had that revelation, that feeling of like, this is a beautiful world. This is and so I do recognize what you're saying. It really is important, and I think therapeutically it's important.
Mm-hmm.
Amanda, you remember how clear it was after the rain last week? It's always nice after rain, but after this one, when there's a lot less pollution in the air because of the low traffic, I mean, it was like the old days.
Yeah.
I haven't encountered that kind of atmosphere in decades.
Well, one of the things that people are observing internationally is the diminution in pollution.
Mhm.
So apparently throughout the world, places that really have suffered from extremes of pollution, suddenly, because there's so much less traffic, there's less pollution. So maybe a slightly positive outcome.
Life has its little compensations.
There you go.
So, Rabbi, what you were saying before, when we started to talk about Elijah, the door, opening the door, and that shows faith, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that on every Friday night, when we sing L'cha Dodi and we face the door to usher in the Shabbat Queen, that's a show of faith, isn't that? That also, am I reading that wrong?
I don't think that it's a question of right or wrong, Joan. I think it's open to individual interpretation, how you experience that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you experience that as an expression of faith, I think that's perfectly legitimate.
Okay.
But
That was
opening
one
up-
of the things that it was in the reading was, he talked about honoring Shabbat as a
yes.
way to faith or as a show of faith,
Right.
which I actually thought was interesting because I think of that, it's in the list of all the mitzvot. And yet the way that it's practiced, some of it is laid out in law, but a lot of it is ritual. So it took me a while to sort of get around to, I thought, like, when I first read it, I was like, this is an ancillary plug for Shabbat. Was what I felt when I was reading it. Like, here's a plug for Shabbat. He's telling us. And Shabbat is something that I actually have changed my perspective on and waxed and waned over the years as to how I was going to, if I was going to, and how I was going to honor Shabbat. But then the more I thought about it, the more I came around to his way of thinking, in that it is kind of I struggle a lot with faith, but it is kind of a show of that you do something like that on a regular basis, and that you're going to take that time, and that you're going to do something different, even if it doesn't have to do with prayer and it doesn't have to do with thinking about God. You're doing something in your life that shows that you have some sort of faith in something.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a demonstration, and
Yeah.
they're myriad. I mean, in a way that Shaviti, it's every second, everything is a doorway into faith. Kind of when I was reading through these things, it kind of seemed to me that you kind of fall into it. It's almost like an ocean. You just kind of dive in, and you're in there. And it comes, sometimes it's a calm sea, sometimes it's a rough sea, but it's just kind of up there, and it's always moving.
Ebb and flow.
And yeah, ebb and flow, and its access points are innumerable. They just happen in lots of different ways all the time. And when we do the faith thing, what I've gotten out of this is it like you say, Shabbat, any kind of service, any kind of ritual, being in this class, it's all a matter of focusing. And that's what faith does. It kind of focuses reverence and awe. I mean, I think this is all discussed in our text, and I know we're going to get into it. So, but that's kind of, it really is kind of the fulcrum point of everything. I was just kind of, when I started reading this chapter, I said to myself, oh, here we are. We've been doing this for what, 2 years now? And now we finally get into the heart of the matter.
Ginny, did you want to say something?
No, I'm Michael, you really opened that up. That was very nice. That was very nice.
So we have nature as a doorway to faith. We have Shabbat as a doorway to faith. Where else have you felt connected to a sense of faith? And people have mentioned awe as a part of it.
I have to say, though, I still struggle with even the word faith. Jennifer and I talked about this a lot. Its connection to the word God, which is another difficult concept, and one that is a struggle for me and a lot of people, I'm sure. So, and Michael might see it as an ocean, but sometimes it is an ocean, but sometimes it's a puddle that you're trying to get into. I prefer the words awe and nature over the words faith and God.
I hear you. I think that what trips me up with it is the word belief. That's the challenging word. Is my friend Sandra, you guys all know Sandra. Sandra and I were discussing. Sandra said Rabbi Hartman once said that he believes in God, but he doesn't trust him. I said to Sandra, no, I don't believe in God, but I trust God. So it's, that's the tricky word, that idea of how do you hold that and get a grasp on it. So I guess we'll look for our sheet. Which text are you looking at, Rabbi?
Right. So I'm looking at the thoughts on emunah and faith, and I think I'm hearing a lot of what you're saying reflected on some of these comments, and even Alan Moranis, the first two opening quotes are from him. A fully resolved faith is a dead faith. So, we call ourselves the people of Israel, right? So what does Israel mean? Yisrael.
Struggle with God.
To struggle with God. So the Jewish way is not thy will be done. The Jewish way is we get to challenge God, engage with God, struggle with God. So I don't think that Judaism teaches us that we just need to fully accept and have that total trust that you're trying to describe there, Michael. I don't think that's the.
Oh, I understand that completely. It's not like our Muslim cousins that say it's all about submission to the will of God.
Yes, exactly. So Yisrael versus Islam. The word Islam means to submit. Yisrael is to challenge God. So a fully resolved faith, he says, is a dead faith. We're always in a process, in a conversation.
Mhm.
And this one line, number 2, is what saves the word faith and the concept of faith for me, because I struggle with it just as much as the next person. The main feature of faith is seeking it.
Right.
So,
Yeah, after the readings, I started to see faith as a verb, like David Cooper talks about God as a verb.
yes,
You
absolutely.
don't just have it. You're always seeking it.
That's good, Judith. That's nice.
Yeah,
I
I like that.
excellent.
So can somebody read number 3 there, Rabbi Eliyahu Lopian?
I've got it.
Thanks.
Just as humans need air and food for the preservation of his body, so he needs the wherewithal for his person, spirit, and soul. What is the air of the soul? Faith. Without faith, the soul cannot exist and must die. Faith for the soul is as the air one breathes, and without air, man cannot endure at all.
Wow. So pretty powerful statement. And I think that the next text from Aaron Zeitlin is another personal favorite, because he's talking about that process of engagement. He's talking about the ocean versus the puddle, to put it in your words. Praise me, says God, and I will know that you love me. Curse me, says God, and I will know that you love me. Praise me or curse me, and I will know that you love me. Sing out my graces, says God. Raise your fist against me and revile, says God. Sing out graces or revile. Revile is also a kind of praise, says God. But if you sit fenced off in your apathy, says God, if you look at the stars and yawn, if you see suffering and don't cry out, if you don't praise and you don't revile, then I created you in vain, says God. So I love that, because it just focuses on that idea of the relationship, that faith is about being in the relationship. And we all know from being in relationships that they all ebb and flow.
This reminds me of the Elie Wiesel quote. He said, you might believe in God, you might not believe in God, but you can't ignore God.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So, a few, well, there's actually a lot here. So let's, all right, can somebody read this number 5,
Okay.
Rabbi Ira Eisenstein?
I'll read it.
Thanks.
Nobody ever saw electricity. We know that it exists.
We can see and feel what electricity does. If we have an electric bulb and connect it with an electric wire, we get light. If we have an electric heater and connect it, we get heat. In other words, we get to know what electricity is by what it does. In the same way, we get to know what God is by what God makes us do. When a person is, so to speak, connected with God, he does good things. Whenever this force is active, we say that God has exercised influence and power.
So thoughts on that one? Ira Eisenstein, the son-in-law of Mordecai Kaplan, who's the founder of the Reconstructionist movement. So Kaplan defined God as what he called the power that makes for salvation, or what we might reframe as the force for good in the world that we can connect with. And then this is his son-in-law using the analogy of electricity.
This runs parallel to Rabbi Steinsaltz, who talks about science concepts like electromagnetism, things like that, and physics, these forces like gravity and electromagnetism that we can't see, but are happening all the time. And he discusses them when he writes about the relationship between matter and spirit and the various impacts of each. They're both impactful.
So
they both come at us to build our faith.
So the point being, we believe in a lot of things that we can't see.
Correct.
But now I have a question about that. So we believe in these things because they've been tested out and the light bulb lights up. We don't have that for God.
Mhm.
And that's where maybe, Sarah, you were saying about, so hard, it is hard to have, well, okay, I just got myself to it. Blind faith. Blind faith. Never mind. Okay, this is not blind faith we're talking about.
Yeah, but like I enjoy the first analogy in here. When I read this, I really like Michael was saying, all these things that we can't see and we don't know. Like for me, when you look at microscopic things and how fascinating they are, I like all that, but I just have problems with the end of that. That your connection with God is what makes you do good, and that is God. That almost implies that when someone does something bad, that there's no God, which is not true, because we started out speaking about that there's a light within everyone that is a piece of, in my words, wonder, or you can use the word God, that exists in everyone. So God isn't just good. I mean, we talk about that. We just talked about it in the one before this. God's also not good. So that I, the end of that, I didn't buy at all.
So you wouldn't accept the idea that that person has the switch turned off, that we have that control within ourselves to make the choice to turn the switch on and off.
That's exactly what I think. I think that when you do good, you're choosing to do good. And when you do not good things, you're choosing to do not good things. And that doesn't have a lot to do with God.
The weirdest thing is that people who do bad things think they're doing good. They're absolutely convinced.
Some people are inherently know that they're doing things that aren't good. But
no, I think that the part of their thing is that they are convinced. What my friend Barry Goldwater used to call preachers. They're convinced in their righteousness, and I think that's discussed in our text as we kind of go through this. What was the text for today? What was the text, Rabbi, that we're doing next? That we were supposed to read? Yeah, keep going.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Hang on, I'm just having a senior moment here. Oh, the way of God, the Luzzatto text.
Oh, your Chavruta.
Okay. Yeah. There's a guy named Josh Billings, a famous quote. Some people say it's Twain. It's not so much the things that people believe, it's the things that they believe that ain't.
Yeah.
So Sarah, I'm going to ask you to read number 7, because I think that that Abraham Joshua Heschel is articulating what you're saying.
Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel described an experience of faith in his book, God in the Search of Man. Our goal should be to live life in radical amazement. Get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted. Everything is phenomenal. To be spiritual is to be amazed. Yeah, that more clearly reflects how I think.
Yeah. Good. So I want to now fast forward to this exercise in number 10. Joan is very familiar with this. When I teach in the introduction to Judaism class about God, Joan diligently takes each of these statements and prints them on their own strip of paper. And the students then get to, one might say, build their own definition of God by going around the room. We put all these pieces of paper around the room, and people get to get a piece of construction paper and get to cut and paste their own idea of God. So I'm going to ask you to kind of virtually do that right now. If you have the list printed out, or if you just want to copy it on the screen, let's take maybe 5 minutes. What time is it? I don't see what time it is.
11:39.
11:39. So let's say 11:45. We'll take a couple of minutes and see which one of these are true for you.
Go ahead, go for it, honey. Still muted?
I thought I'd give you a little music.
What's the matter?
Take about 1 more minute. All right. So hopefully you had a chance to review all of these, and these are just some thoughts. Obviously, you are welcome to add to them. Is there, I'm gonna, I don't think we need the screen anymore, so let me,
Thank you.
yeah, let me stop sharing the screen. Oh. Uh-oh, I seem to have lost you though. Oh, here we go. Stop sharing. Good, there we go. Everybody's back now. Excellent. So how was that exercise for you? Anything surprising?
Yeah, I was surprised that on some of those attributes, I wasn't sure how I felt. You know, I know that when we go to temple on Yom Kippur and we, you know, we talk about judgment and all this, and I wasn't really sure how I felt about being judged or that God judges. So I had a problem with that one, and I also had a problem with the last one about whether when you do something good, your Yetzer Hatov is God. You know, I don't know. I just those were, and there were a couple of others, but you know, without looking at them, I couldn't tell you.
I think that was what Sarah was kind of saying. She was struggling with that, the association of the Yetzer Hatov with God. So Sandy, that's interesting. You're an attorney by trade.
Mm-hmm.
So, so God as a lawgiver, and then therefore the judge. I'm wondering how much your professional background influences your thinking on that.
I don't know. You know, I haven't really given that a lot of thought. You know, I know that society has certain rules, and we have a legal framework, and you know, the rules are generally to benefit society. Sometimes they're not. At least in my opinion. So you know, sometimes I don't agree with certain rules or certain judgments. So, you know, I just don't think of God as standing there and judging every single thing that everybody does all the time.
So I want to say two things. First of all, apropos of Maimonides and the doctrine of negative attributes, you pointed to two things that you don't connect with, the idea of God as judge and God as the Yetzer Hara. So I'd be interested to hear if there was one that you did positively resonate with. And then, you were talking about judging, and you were talking about judging every single action. So I wonder if those are different at all. If we can think about, God as looking at the sum total of who we are versus the question is, how involved is God in being aware of and judging every aspect of every decision that we make. There's a theological concept that's called hashgacha prati. Prati is like private. Individual hashgacha, individual providence is the way that's translated. So there are those who believe what's called the Watchmaker Theory of God, that the world is like a watch. It clearly was put together by some intelligent design, but then God just put the world down, wound it up, and left it ticking. So the world is just ticking on its own. So that's called the Watchmaker Theory. And the contrast to that is what you're talking about, this idea of individual providence, that no, God didn't just make the world and go on to other projects, or just stepping back and watching, no pun intended, what's going on, that God is individually involved in every moment of our lives. And there are plenty of people who believe that. I mean, there are people who think that if they make the light at the intersection, or if they don't, that was God influencing their lives. So that's an extreme example, and yet there are people who do walk around in the world with that kind of a theological perspective. Joni, I saw your hand. Let's unmute you.
I believe people invented God, and the closest I can come to it is the Watchmakers Theory. And I don't believe that we have the intelligence to have figured it out. And it could be, and it could not be. I freely admit I simply don't have the intelligence. I have faith in nature and the beauty of the world, but I can't tell you how it was created. Is that okay to tell you?
Absolutely.
God is watching.
Maybe.
Could
I'm
be.
with you, Joni. I'm with
Could
you.
be. I don't know, Michael.
Well, that's the
If you
point.
believe that, that's beautiful.
That's the difficulty. That's the struggle. It's that point between belief and disbelief.
Yeah.
Those points of doubt
Right.
that each one of us has.
And that doubt shows up in this little thing that we just did. What do you believe about God? Because when I'm answering these, when I'm numbering them, I'm like a schizophrenic person. Because, on one hand, I'm saying, yes, I talk to God when I pray. On the other hand, I'm like saying, no, I don't think God cares about my little individual life at all. So,
Yeah.
but that's
You feel
the struggle.
presumptuous.
It's the struggle in our faith and our whatever. I mean, it's, on the one hand, maybe it's you want to believe, you want to have that faith, and on the other hand, you can't, or you don't, or whatever it is. But I'm always all over the place with these things.
I think that's
I'm
why.
open. I'm very open.
But that's why people look at
That's
faith as a
faith.
tipping.
That's what faith is, being open to it.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a tipping point. It's a balance.
Yes.
It's Martin Buber always had the phrase. It was like
Yeah.
a counter on a narrow ridge. You're always walking that fine line.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what Craig thinks. Because I was, before we had this, Jennifer and I were talking, and I said, I'll be interested to hear what different people think regarding this. And we were kind of talking about you people. And I was like, I think that Craig is like, he's probably got one of the strongest faiths in the group, because he's talked about God before. And most of the rest of us, we don't use that word. So I
The
want to know what
waters
Craig.
run deep. Craig, no pressure, but if you
If you want to share, Craig, I don't want to put you on the spot.
So
I'm
no,
interested.
I don't mind at all. So I have a pretty firm faith, and I have a pretty solid belief in God, and I think that as far as the I kind of missed what exactly we were studying. I had to go to the bathroom, so so I'm walking in on the conversation a bit, but my faith is my foundation, and I think that I believe the watchmaker theory, to the extent that, yes, God is the creator and he said all this, but I do believe that he listens to my prayers. He listens to all our prayers. And it may not seem like God is answering your prayer the way you want it to be answered, but still the answer is there. And I may not be able to see it. But I also believe that, like, this stumbling point that over the word belief or over the word faith, I'm accountable for my actions. So and when it gets to that point, that may be that spark of God inside of me that is doing the accounting and the judgment. And that's how it comes to me. So, and what I do with that is that it helps me to keep my balance in things, and it helps me as a guidepost. Should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? Is the right thing to do? So yeah. I tend to have a lot more certainty in faith in God than I think a lot of people do. And I don't know how to impart that. I think that we were talking about the Hevruta the other day, and there was a part in there talking about how faith comes experientially. And I think it came to me because, until for most of my life, I was not very religious. I was not very tuned into God. I was always curious because I came from a religious family, and I was like, how come I'm not getting it? How come their answers don't satisfy me, don't answer my question? And I had some experiences about 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, but and they completely changed my view and my world. And that's when God really came strongly into my life. So.
Yeah. Craig, I had a similar experience with experiential. When I was growing up, I didn't have much of a connection one way or the other. I wasn't getting it. And I wasn't getting a Jewish education either. But when I got older and went through a divorce, that's when I felt the need for God, and I felt a connection and a growth. And I'm just curious to know if others have had that experience as well.
Yeah, I have. I've had experiences where, and I think the first one was with Rabbi Burke, and my need for study and my need for a plaque on the wall saying I was Jewish, piece of paper. What is it? The scarecrow, I guess, somebody. That these things would come to me periodically. It'd almost be like a push on the shoulder. Something would happen and I would be totally scrambled and confused. And then I realized what I really wanted was an in-depth, and I hesitate to say this, because an in-depth connection to God, okay? Because I shudder when I hear I have a personal relationship to God, only because of, I've had experiences where people have had negative outcomes with that idea. Okay, so for me, I was nicely checking off, I believe in this, I believe in that, and then every single one of them practically, when I had a question mark added to, or a note. I believe God helps us heal by our own actions. And then I wrote in the column here about the lifeboat story, about the man in the flooding building, and God finally says, listen, I sent you 3 boats, and you didn't take them.
Right.
What happened? I believe that God judges our actions. Actions, as I said, have consequences. The one that scared me the most, in a way, and it wasn't written this way, God is a sort of source of comfort. And what I wrote next to it was, God will provide. And I think that is a very dangerous thought. God will provide. We have to provide. At one point, isn't it Hillel and Shammai saying, arguing about the ovens of Achnai, right? And God says, oh, my children have surpassed me. So Torah is here with us. It's not in the heavens. It's with us. And so some of them actually, they were too close to fundamentalist thinking. I guess that puts it in language that suits me.
Too absolute.
So it's noon and time to wrap up. I did want to share, just as it so happens in my Torah study this morning, we're reading Leviticus 26, which talks about reward and punishment. The Parsha Bechukotai begins, Im Bechukotai Telechu. If you walk in my paths, if you do the mitzvot, then you'll get all of these rewards. And then if you don't, you'll get all of this punishment. So it is that very kind of specific primitive theology. And we're reading from Torah Commentary for Our Times. I just wanted to share this quote from Claude Montefiore, which is exactly relevant to what folks were talking here. Suffering brings out and develops character. It supplies a field for all sorts of virtues. And listen to the virtues it mentions: for resignation, faith, courage, resource, endurance. It stimulates, it purifies. Now, we can certainly argue with that, but I also do hear people saying that a lot of their faith has emerged out of challenging experience. So that's what made me think about that quote. Maybe I'll email that to you also
Thank you.
when we follow up. So we're late, which I now with my father is having a fit because I'm late, but
but we're not done.
Yeah, and this Kivyachol in the chat, I'll bring that up next week, next time, and explain that. But any quick final thoughts or reflections?
Sarah, you really nailed us, probably, right? You know us by now.
Isn't that a great thing? I love that. So look for the link to this recording and for our next session. And as I said, I want to get together with Rivka this week and figure out what the plan is for Chabur and how we can make that happen.
Good.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good. Thank you.
Hi, Rabbi.
Thanks, everybody.
Finish
everybody.
a healthy week. Yeah, finish strong, 1 o'clock. Don't miss it.
Right.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye.
Okay, bye now.